Jameson Chase Young, and this is Coins in History. Today I'm going to be talking about the very infamous battle in Vietnam, Dak To. Afterwards, I'll be talking about the 1967 Kennedy half dollar, which is unique and special in itself, so please stick around for that. But Dak To, some of those names, kind of like the World War II battles, like the Iwo Jima and the Okinawa, some of those names that kind of like live in infamy, very notorious throughout history. And when it comes to Vietnam, things like the Tet Offensive and Khe Sanh and Dak To are one of those names that really live in infamy, And it was a really horrible escalation in Vietnam. It all started. It took place in November of 1967, and during this time, for the last year, couple years, the whole escalation of Vietnam had been getting worse and worse and worse. And the Viet Cong, they staged, if you look on the map, Dak To, it's in the center part of Vietnam towards Laos. So it's near the border, and that's one of the reasons why the Viet Cong chose it. It was a very strategically great location. One, it was an important location for the Ho Chi Minh Trail, plus it was near Laos. So, if they got in trouble as far as like the U.S. troops beating them in this battle, they could just hop the border, and the U.S. troops weren't allowed to go into Laos after them. So they picked it strategically, and they prepared for this for a long time, because they surmassed troops at that area, because it's also known, side note, it's also known as the border battles. And they surmassed troops near there, and they really prepared their area. Like on this one hill called Hill 875, they dug trenches. They, had like machine gun nests, and they were really ready for this battle. And not only did they want to suck U.S. troops in here and trying to give as many casualties to U.S. troops as they possibly could, but it was also a side diversion, because that, the Dak To, it happened in November 3rd to November 23rd, and it was in late January of 1968 when the Tet Offensive would be happening. So it was a side diversion to not only try and inflict as many U.S. casualties as possible, but also try to get U.S. forces away from the really populated areas where they knew in just a matter of a month or a couple months they're going to be hitting those populated areas hard during the Tet Offensive. So it was like a diversion battle, as well as trying to inflict a lot of casualties. But the battle, though, did kind of play out as is, kind of. One thing that really helped U.S. service guys out, because in Vietnam, we never lost a major engagement, and we outkilled the enemy 20-1. So we had a really high kill ratio, but, it didn't really matter. And Dak To was one of those first battles that kind of showed it didn't really matter. It's like, wait a minute, U.S. troops won this battle easily, but it's still like public opinion started to cave against the war and all that. Just the fact that these guys had the ability to do that to the United States is one of the reasons why it was like a psychological damaging thing to the U.S. public, to U.S. servicemen, just to the war-winning effort in general. But one thing that, like I was about ready to say, one thing that always helped U.S. troops in Vietnam was our air support. But one of the things that the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese army, did to try and null this was they tried to make the fighting as close as possible. Here's the enemy and here's you, and you're fighting them close, point blank range. Well, the enemy can't call in air power on you, and that was one of the things that made the Dak To really bad, just because the enemy was they had dug tunnels, and they were really pushing up close to U.S. servicemen, and the fighting was really bad, especially on that hill 875. But there was a whole bunch of hills around that area where the fighting was nightmarishly bad. At the end, by late November, U.S. servicemen, the U.S. forces had gained relatively control of the area. The Viet Cong were pushed out. They did body counts, because when they surmassed, they guesstimated that the Viet Cong surmassed around, it's kind of hard to say, because some casualties say some reports say they got 6,000, some reports say they got 12,000. So what that basically means is we don't really know how many Viet Cong, North Vietnamese soldiers surmassed in that Dak To region, but there was a lot. And then afterwards, when the battle was done, like in Vietnam, how they, normally would, stereotypically would, they'd go out and get their body counts. And, their body counts were in the 6, 7, 800s but that seemed a little bit impossible. But the Viet Cong, they did lots of times like hide their dead and stuff. But so they, as far as Viet Cong wounded, it's very unknown how many of them were killed or wounded. I think with U.S. service guys, it was around 450 people wounded, 450 people killed. And as the U.S., took control of the area, they did their body counts, and I think they came out to, on this occasion, it was a 5 or 6 to 1 kill ratio. For every one U.S. service person, there was 5 or 6 Viet Cong, according to the battlefield body counts. Now, those are pretty inaccurate, but as it stands, that was a percentage-wise lot worse battle than what the United States military normally was used to, because, like I said, on average, we inflicted even higher kill ratios than that. But yes, it was the Battle of Dak To. Very famous battle. I think they've made a couple movies about it. I know it's been mentioned in several movies. I know it was mentioned in the movie Hamburger Hill, that Vietnam movie. And it's a very famous, very infamous, kind of, like I said, it lives in infamy in the minds of people who know a lot about history, about wars and stuff. And this was going on in November 3rd, into late November, around November 23rd, 1967. And it was when this battle, Dak To, was going on, was when the 1967 Kennedy half dollar was being minted. Now, the 1967 Kennedy half dollar, it's a very unique coin for multiple reasons. One, it does not have a mint mark. From 1965 to 1967, for whatever reason, the U.S. Mint left off mint marks. They didn't put any mint marks on in the coins, the half dollars at that time. But it doesn't really matter, because most of them were minted at the Philadelphia Mint, but regardless, they have no mint mark. The other thing that's really amazing about the 1967 Kennedy half dollar is, they stopped making 90% silver in 1964. After 1970, that's when they started making the coins we have, today. They're all like copper clad. But in 1967, from the mid-60s all the way through the late 60s, that's when they did 40% silver. The coins minted like the Kennedy half dollar and minted in the mid to late 60s, those are the only coins that are 40% silver. So that makes it unique. Not having a mint mark, it makes it unique. And, obviously it, came out in 1964, the Kennedy half dollar. And, of course, JFK was killed in 1963. So it's kind of like a tribute to him. But, and believe it or not, they still make versions of the Kennedy half dollar to this day, even though I haven't seen them in circulation or used them to pay for anything for a lot of years. But okay, there's a total mintage of 295,046,978. The mint location is Philadelphia. The composition is 40% silver, 60% copper. The silver content in these 67 half dollars, these coins contain 40% silver, a total silver weight of 0.1479 troy ounces. It was this Kennedy half dollar that was being minted when the Vietnam Battle of Dak To was being fought. Very, very horrible event, but it was a very interesting time period in history. And, the Kennedy half dollar, like I pointed out, it's a very unique coin for multiple reasons. Very interesting time period, very unique coin. And I hope that you enjoy these videos. I hope you like these videos. If you do, please hit the like button and please subscribe. Thank you.